We got more of Going Cowboy Crazy right now, you and me, and the book will start in here on page 116. But the grass didn't concern her as much as the pedestrian. With her heart in her throat, she laid on the horn just in time to alert the young man. He dove out of the way. She jerked the steering wheel, the truck careening across the road to the opposite shoulder before she slammed on the brakes. She jerked up the emergency brakes, then opened the door and jumped down. "Oh, my God!" She raced around the back. "Are you okay?" The teenage boy stared up at her from the spot on the ground. His ball cap was flown off, and he had one iPod earplug intact while the other hung off his dusty T-shirt. "Have you lost your mind, lady?" He got up, and his rangy body unfolding to fold 3 good inches over 6 feet, and brushed off the dirt on his jeans. "I am so sorry." Faith picked a chunk of salt off his shoulder. "I was not paying attention." "No crap," he said before he blushed. "Pardon me, ma'am, but cuss words have a way of slipping out during stressful situations, and almost being killed is a pretty stressful situation." Since Faith had used the king daddy of all cuss words just minutes earlier, she couldn't say much. "Maybe we should take you to the hospital." She leaned closer. "Is that a cut on your forehead? Oh, no, you're bleeding." "It's nothing." He reached down to pick up his backpack. Of course it's something. We need to get that clean before it gets infection. People can die from infection." She picked up his cap and then grabbed his arm and tugged him back toward the truck, which wasn't an easy task with a big kid. "Are you feeling dizzy or nauseous?" "Geez, I'm fine." But Faith refused to release him until she reached out the truck and took out the disinfectant wipes. She pulled out 2 wipes, and as she examined the small cut, actually it was more like a scratch, which caused her to relax a little. "So what were you doing walking along the highway? Don't you know how dangerous that is?" She handed him the wipes. "Don't put these in your mouth." By a confused look on his face, it was a stupid warning, but she couldn't take any chances. "It wasn't dangerous until you showed up," he said, as he took a swipe over his forehead. "How else am I going to get to school when my mom refuses to buy me a car?" She snapped the lid closed on the wipes and then put them on the back. "So you're headed to school?" "Unfortunately," he grumbled. "You don't like school?" "Hate." She glanced at him. "Hate is a pretty strong word." He shrugged his bony shoulders. "So is this your truck? I thought it belonged to some guy named Bubba." He stuffed the wipes into the front pocket of his jeans. Bubba? Who was Bubba? She might have questioned him if it hadn't just dawned on her what the difference was about this young man. He didn't have talk like a twang or drop his G's. "Where are you from?" "Iowa." She smiled and held out her hand. "Then we're neighbors. I'm Faith Aldridge from Chicago." His large hand engulfed hers as he gave it a quick, large shake. "Austin Reeves." "Austin?" "Yeah, I know it's real funny that I should be named after a city and a place I hate, but that's what happens when you don't get a say in your name." Austin grabbed his cap off the seat where she placed it and tugged it down over his wavy brown hair. "I wish I could say it's been a pleasure meeting you, but you almost getting killed ranks up right up there with moving to this hellhole." He lifted a hand as he turned. "See you around, Faith Eldridge." He only took a few steps when she stopped him. "Wait. Why don't you let me give you a ride to school? It's the least I can do." He hesitated. "That thing got seat belts?" Faith laughed. "Yes, but I promise I'll be more careful." It was easier said than done. As soon as they were back on the road, she fought to keep the big truck from straddling the yellow line. "So do you play sports, Austin?" she asked, trying to make conversation. "Some. Basketball, it seems likely given his height." "No, football. At least I played football in Iowa where they didn't let idiot coach." He shot a glance over at her. "Sorry. Like everyone else in this town, you probably love Coach Calhoun." "Love?" Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Not hardly." Austin shot her a startled look before a smile spread across his face, a smile that transformed from a gangly kid to a handsome young man. "So I guess you and I are the only people in Bramble who aren't members of the Slate Calhoun fan club." "I guess so." She glanced over at him. "So why don't you like him?" "Because he's a jerk." She lifted an eyebrow. "Well, he is. He crossed his arms. He bumped me a darn good quarterback off his team just because I told him the rules sucked. He said I had an attitude problem." "And do you?" "Hell yes, I have an attitude problem. Who wouldn't have an attitude problem when their parents get a divorce and their mother drags them halfway across the country, away from their friends and their family to some lame town with a bunch of redneck hillbillies?" He slunched down in the seat and the ball cap was sitting low. His words sounded so much like her thoughts she couldn't help but agree. Parents can be real idiots. He peeked out beneath the brim of his baseball cap and grinned. I like you, Faith Aldridge, even if you did try to run me over. She grinned back at him. I like you too, Austin, even if you have a bad attitude. He tipped up his hat. So are you headed into town? Yes, it seems Sheriff Winslow forgot where he put my car. So you're the woman everyone's talking about, the one going back to Hollywood. Rather than explain, she only nodded. Lucky, he grumbled, then a second later perked up. You wouldn't want a traveling companion, would you? She shook her head. I don't think taking a kid across a state line is a good idea. I'm not a kid, I'm almost 17. Fine, I don't think taking a minor across the state line is a good idea. Bummer, he slouched back down in the seat. Funny, but Faith suddenly didn't feel as upset and angry as she did earlier. In fact, Austin made her realize she didn't have it so bad. She wasn't stuck in this lame town. In fact, a couple of hours, she'd be on her way to California, and Bramble would be nothing more than a bad memory, or more like a bad nightmare. The high school was on the outskirts of town. The parking lot was filled with beat-up trucks as teenagers arrived for school, taking one or two on her way into the narrow driveway. Afraid of taking out one or two on her way through the narrow driveway, Faith pulled off to the side of the road to let Austin out. Hey, thanks for the lift, he said as he scrambled down from the truck. Sure you won't change your mind about taking me with you? I'm sure. He went to slam the door, but stopped and pulled it back open. Listen, I probably shouldn't say anything because I don't understand what these crazy Texans are talking about, but from what I overheard, I don't think Sheriff Winslow forgot where he put your car. Faith's brows drew together. What do you mean? I think he hid it. All some grand scheme to keep you here. Although I thought the girl they were talking about was named Hope. Words escaped her. All she could do was stare back at the kid until he shrugged and slammed the door. The jarring sound snapped her out of the daze, and her eyes narrowed as she gunned the truck and bounced back out on the highway. Okay. On page 124, Slate ignored him and reached for her again. Now, Faith, just listen to me. Don't you touch me, she screamed. Don't you ever touch me again. Fine, he glared back at her. I won't. Good. Faith whirled around and headed for the truck. And just where in the hell do you think you're going? To California. Without a car. He stepped in front of her. Because you're sure not taking this truck. He pointed a finger. Hell, you can't even park the damn thing. Go to hell. She tried to march around him, but he grabbed her arm. I realized this morning couldn't have been one of your better days, but if you would just settle down a minute, we could get some things worked out. Really? She stopped struggling. Like maybe why you failed to mention that you and my sister are... She couldn't even bring herself to say the word. Friends, he finished for her. Just friends. Friends! She let her temper rise and she pulled him from his grasp. Is that why her mother wasn't surprised to find us in bed together and why the entire town is holding me hostage because you and Hope are just friends? Slate's gaze flickered. Now I can see where this might be confusing, darling. It's a pretty complicated situation. Well, let me uncomplicate it for you. She shoved her way around him and jerked open the truck door. What are you doing? I'm leaving. She pulled her purse out and hooked it over her shoulder. Haven't you figured out by now that the crazy people of this town aren't going to give you your car back? He ran a hand over the back of his neck. Damned fools. Which means you fit right in. She turned and headed for the street. Just where do you think you're going? To find a hotel and then find a lawyer who will sue the hell out of this town. Faith tossed the words over her shoulder as she marched across the dirt parking lot. When she reached the strip of the asphalt that ran through the center of Bramble, it took her a moment to figure out what direction to head in, a moment that gave Slate a chance to climb in that monster truck and pull it up next to her. Damn it, Faith, get in this truck. He leaned down and spoke through the open window. When hell freezes over. She adjusted her purse strap and headed toward the Welcome to Bramble sign. Would you stop walking and listen to me? The closest hotel is a good 50 miles away. 50 miles, she hesitated. And that one fills up with roughnecks at night. Not a good situation for a pretty single woman. So stop being so stubborn and getting in this truck. You can stay with me until I find your car. I am not staying with you. Fine, you can go to stay with Jenna and Burl. If his plan was to tick her off, he achieved it. I'd rather sleep with 100 sex-starved roughnecks. He banged the steering wheel with his fists. Then what the hell do you want me to do, Faith? Leave you here on the side of the road? She opened her mouth to tell him exactly what she wanted him to do, except the words refused to come out, probably because she was angry as she was with him, as she really didn't want him to leave her. He was only semi-friend she had in town, but the thought of him driving away didn't exactly make her feel good. The things had been so much easier if Jenna and Burl hadn't shown up, and she remained blissfully ignorant, Faith. Instead of standing on the side of the road, she would still be snuggled up against Slate's hard, warm chest. Unfortunately, Jenna and Burl had arrived with that knowledge that this man wasn't hers to snuggle up with. He was Hope's. Faith's jaw tightened along with the resolve. Yes, Slate, I want you to leave. He stared at her for a few seconds, his eyes gorgeous and sincere, before he nodded. Fine. I guess I'll see you around. Okay, and then her good... Okay, we're going to keep going on page 128. Her goodbye got stuck behind the lump that had formed in her throat, and all she could do was stare back at him, completely unaware of the black Lincoln Navigator that had pulled up. Well, I'll be damned. If I hadn't seen it with my own 2 eyes, I never would have believed it. A beautiful blonde came around from the SUV. Before Faith could take any one step back, she was smothered against her chest. Same dwarfy size, same bony body. The woman pulled back and studied Faith with sparkling eyes the color of wet spring grass. Hair's different, very polished. The woman flashed white teeth and dimples before she tipped her head down and looked at Slate through the window. What's cooking, good looking? The smile Slate sent her lacked his usual charm. Hey, Shirl, how was Dallas? Filled with plenty of stores for me to spend Lyle's money in. Her gaze shifted between the two of them. Did I interrupt something? The smile deepened. My bad, or maybe my good, since it looks like you two could use a little distance. She hooked an arm through Faith's. Come on, honey, let's go back to the house, and you can tell Shirlene all about it. Faith dug her boot heels and glanced back at Slate. Grudgingly he nodded. Go on with Shirlene, darling. She's a good friend. Good friend to whom? Faith wanted to ask, but it wasn't like that she had another choice. Go with Slate, stay at Jenna's and Burl's, or walk 50 miles wouldn't become a roughneck's main squeeze. The beautiful blonde was the brightest smile, seemed the best option. Still, once in the passenger side of the Navigator, Faith started to have second thoughts. The only reason the woman was so happy to see her was because she thought Faith was Hope, which meant she needed to explain things before they went anywhere. But before she could open her mouth, Shirlene surprised her. Welcome to Bramble, Faith. She winked. You like margaritas? Because I make the best margaritas this side of the Rio Grande. She whipped the SUV around and headed the opposite direction from Slate. Did you know that frozen margaritas were invented by a Texan? Faith didn't know that, but she also didn't know how sad she would feel watching a truck with offensive bumper stickers and 2 flapping flags grow smaller and smaller in the side mirror. Oh, stubborn, foolish pride gets the best of us every time, doesn't it? Moving forward. Okay. I remember the first day he swaggered into school, even at 13. He was drop-dead gorgeous, and the charm. Man alive, he had the charm. I thought half the girls were going to pass out for the first time he spoke. Hope and I had our very first fight over who would get to sit next to him. Of course, Hope won. She shook her gorgeous blonde hair, and that girl won any contest she entered, even if she didn't particularly want it. Faith lifted her head up from the couch cushion. She didn't want Slate? Oh, no, she wanted Slate, but she could have done without Miss Hog Collar of the Caskin counties. Burl was the one who entered her in that every year, and every year I got to hear her complain about it, of course. Hope didn't complain to anyone else. She's not a complainer, more of a pain-in-the-butt overachiever. So Slate and Hope were, it was hard for her to get that word out, an item? Were? Oh, honey, to this town Hope and Slate are still an item. Fighting down a fresh wave of anger, Faith picked up her margarita and drained it. When she set it back down, Shirlene was smiling. It's not anything to get upset about. To this town, I'm still Shirlene Lomax, the poor little white trash girl that lives out by Grover Road. Brushing the salt from her lips, Faith glanced around at the tall ornate ceilings, the multi-pane windows, and the intricate marbled floors. White trash. Have they ever been here? Every Christmas, but change is hard for them to accept. Obviously, no matter what I say, I'm still Hope. Well, you do look like her. Her green eyes ran over Faith. If Jenna hadn't called, I might have been fooled, but I might practically physically look like her, but I certainly don't sound or act like her. Sound? No. Act? Now, there I think you might be mistaken. I think you act quite a bit like Hope. You're not as loud or ornery, but you're just as pig-headed." "I'm not pig-headed." The words came out sounding like a belligerent teenager. "Of course you are, otherwise you'd be giving up to change this town's mind and enjoy your stay. Bramble folks are good folks once you get to know 'em, including your mama and daddy. I don't want to get to know my Jenna and Burl, and in fact I'll be lucky if I never see them again." Shirlene topped off her margarita from the pitcher and sat there in the middle of the coffee table. "If I've learned anything about this crazy life of mine, it's never say never. Besides, since your parents are gone, you never know when you need an extra set." When Faith opened her mouth to argue, Shirlene lifted a hand. "I get it. You want nothing to do with 'em. All you want to do is find Hope. But I got to tell you, honey, that might be easier said than done. Hope hasn't been receptive to visitors since moving to L.A. In fact, she's been downright evasive." "Well, I'm sure she'll want to see me." Faith sounded a lot more confident than she felt. "And while I appreciate your hospitality, Shirlene, I'm going to California, even if I have to take a plane." Unfortunately, before the words were even out, she realized her credit cards were in her suitcase, put there in a precaution against the rest stop muggings and Aunt Jillian had warned her about. She had a grand total of $23 in change in her wallet, certainly not enough for a plane ticket or even a bus. She could always call her aunt and they'd have to wire her the money, but if she asked for money, she would need to give an explanation. And there was no explanation for the twilight zone she had landed in, not without causing her aunt to call out the National Guard. And she wasn't ready to do that. At least not until she exhausted all other avenues of escape. Shooting a quick glance at her hostess, Faith cleared her throat. "I was wondering if you could loan me some money, Shirlene, just until I get my car back. I'd love to help you out, honey, but I understand. You have to live in this town. No doubt they'd lynch you if they found you helped me." Defeated, Faith flopped back on the couch. Shirlene snorted. "That's doubtful, since Lyle employs half the town. Besides, that's not why I won't help you." "Then why?" "Because I'm pig-headed as you are, and I think you've got a lot of unfinished business here to take care of before you go traipsing off to California." Great. At that point, Faith might have gotten up and left if the tequila hadn't sapped the last bit of her strength. Besides, where was she going to go? The entire town seemed set on holding her hostage. Leaning in, Shirlene sent her a bright smile. "Now, don't look so downhearted, honey. West Texas might not be Hollywood, but we've got our fair share of entertainment, not to mention a lot full of smoking hot cowboys." "Are you ladies talking about me?" A short, balding man walked in, dressed in creased blue jeans and a western t-shirt, so starched it could stand out on its own. At first, Faith thought it was one of Shirlene's older relatives, but then he leaned over the couch and kissed her, and Faith reevaluated the situation. "Hey, Lyle, honey." Shirlene patted his round cheek before pointing at Faith. "Look who's here." As the man turned, and she sent Faith a wicked wink. "Hope?" His eyes widened. He tossed his cowboy hat down to the coffee table, almost knocking over Faith's margarita glass before he jerked Faith up off the couch and folded her in a stiff cotton and reeked of cigar smoke. "Lord mercy, girl, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" "I'm not Hope," Faith tried to explain. "What?" He set her back down on her boots. His gaze was running over her features. "Well, you're right. You don't look like the Hope I remember. Not with that short hair, but those baby blues are the same." Shirlene giggled, obviously enjoying her little game. "I'm really not Hope. I'm her twin sister, Faith." Lyle chuckled as he leaned down and gave her a kiss right on top of her nose. "You and Shirlene always playing tricks. Remember the last time you took my Cadillac for a joyride?" He shot a smile over at Shirlene, whose giggles had turned out to laughter. "That taught me never to leave you with the keys in the ignition. Hell, you two remind me of Lucy and Ethel with all that mischief you got in you. And speaking of mischief, I've got a hard-headed foreman to attend to before I head to Houston." He reached down and grabbed his cowboy hat off the table, then addressed Shirlene. "I'll be back on Saturday, sugar. If you need me, call me on the cell." Still giggling, she only nodded. Before Lyle left the room, he shot one more glance at Faith and shook his head. "Twin sister." Once he was gone, Faith flopped back down on the couch and glared at Shirlene. "That was not funny." "Oh, yes, it was," she got out between her fits of laughter. Faith watched her for a few seconds before a smile tickled the corners of her mouth. It was impossible to stay mad at a woman with such a love of life. "Okay, so it was pretty funny. But you still didn't help matters. Lucy making Ricky think I'm Hope." Shirlene caught her breath. "Oh, no, I'm not Lucy. Hope's Lucy. I'm Ethel." Her green eyes widened, "which means Lyle is Fred." Since Lyle was a dead ringer for Fred, Faith couldn't help but laugh. "So the margaritas are finally kicking in?" Shirlene asked. Faith shrugged, and even though Shirlene was probably right, she didn't feel as angry as she had. In fact, she felt pretty relaxed. Good. Leaning forward, Shirlene filled their glasses back to the top before handing Faith hers. So here's the plan. We'll get you settled into the guest house, then we'll head over to the high school for homecoming decorating meeting. I can't wait to watch that show. Cindy Lynn has always been wanting to step inside Hope's skin, so it should be real entertaining. Oh, I'm not. Cutting her off, Shirlene lifted her glass. Here's to Lucy and Ethel. May they ride again. She clinked Faith's glass and took a deep drink before holding up the glass again, and to Lucy's twin sister and Ethel, may they get into so much trouble. Unable to refuse Shirlene's offer of friendship, Faith clinked her glass and resigned herself to one more day in Bramble. Besides, how much trouble could you get in at a homecoming decorating meeting? Loaded question, folks. My allergies. Okay. We got 4 more paper clips in tonight's reading. And then we'll stop for tonight. I don't think we're going to finish this book in time. I really don't. But we'll just have to keep on going and do the best we can. Page 146. Faith followed his gaze to the field where young men in football gear were practicing. It didn't take her long to pick out Slate. With the sun turning his hair to burnished gold, he was hard to miss. How did you meet that kid? Shirlene asked. I almost ran over him with Slate's monster truck. Oh, you mean Bubba's truck. Who? Faith glanced over at her. Are we talking about that honkin' big truck with all the stupid bumper stickers? Faith nodded. Yeah, that's Bubba Wilkes' truck. He showed up here a few years back to do some hunting, and I guess he liked it so much he decided to invest in some real estate. She snorted as if anyone but a redneck would want to be a vacation in Bramble. Anyway, I guess Bubba loaned the truck to Slate so he could haul materials out to the house he's building. Slate's building a house? Shirlene pulled her gaze away from the field. Don't tell me you think Slate lives in a beat-up trailer that Bubba uses as a hunting lodge. When Faith only stared back at her, she laughed. And you still like him. Man, you have been bitten by the Calhoun bug. She shook her head. No, Slate is only staying there until that house gets finished. The news she hadn't slept with an arrogant redneck should have made Faith happy. Instead, she was furious. Not only had Slate lied about his relationship with her sister, but he had also lied about his truck and his home. And if he lied about those things, there was no telling what else he lied about. She looked around the huge stadium. I guess Bramble pays their coaches pretty well? Shirlene looked offended. Of course we do. This is Texas, honey. Faith's gaze narrowed on Slate as he walked across the field. Obviously, the man had no honor whatsoever. She watched as he leaned down to scoop up a football and toss it back to one of the players. He had no honor, but in jeans and a polo shirt with that wind ruffling his sun-kissed hair, he had sex appeal in abundance. Yes, she had been bitten by that Calhoun bug, but she would do it all over again. For now, all she could do was sit there and try not to scratch. Damn you, Slate. Coach that kid, Shirlene said, extremely interested in what was taking place on the field. To Faith it looked like mass confusion. What's he doing? She asked. Nothing, Shirlene grumbled. That's the problem. He's been coaching for 4 years, and in all that time I've never seen him communicate with a kid. He comes up with plays and he enforces the stupid rules, but he has no relationship with the team. None at all. She chewed on her thumbnail. If he doesn't make the playoffs this year, he's gone. I don't care if he is a golden boy at Bramble. Lyle won't have a losing team. Lyle owns the team? Honey, Lyle owns most of the town. It doesn't make any sense to Faith, but there wasn't much in Bramble that did, including Shirlene's enthusiasm for football. If she wasn't yelling at Slate, she was yelling at another coach or one of the players. While she ranted, Faith sat there quietly and tried to keep her gaze from wandering back to Slate. It failed miserably. Needing a distraction, she turned her attention to Austin, who was watching the mass confusion of flying balls and smacking shoulder pads with such longing she couldn't help but get up and walk out of the bleachers to where he sat. Sitting down next to him, she stared at the field for a few minutes before she spoke. You know, sometimes people change their minds. About what? Austin looked over at her from beneath the bill of his hat. I'm sure Slate would consider taking you back. That's if he thought your attitude had improved. It hasn't. Okay, I was just making sure you weren't cutting off your own nose to spite your face. Funny, he grumbled. Come on, Shirlene called as she headed down the bleachers. I've had enough torture for one day. Faith got up. You need a ride home, or do you intend to sit here all night and wallow in self-pity? A grin cracked his face. A ride would be good, although the self-pity was kind of fun. She swatted the bill cat off his cap. Come on, smart butt, before Shirlene leaves us. She trotted down the stairs, but was easily overtaken by Austin as he agilely took the bleachers. At the tiny thump of his feet against the aluminum, the girls looked over. One pretty brunette with wide blue eyes smiled over and waved, and Austin blushed. Girlfriend? Faith teased. No. He drew out the word even as he gazed, flickered back to the girl. When they reached the bottom, Shirlene was out of sight, but was nowhere in sight, but Slate was. He moved from the other side of the field and stood on the black, shiny asphalt of the track. A stopwatch hung around his neck, and he held a clipboard as he listened to one of the coaches. It hadn't been easy to ignore him from the 30 bleachers up, only yards away. It was impossible, especially when those deep hazel eyes stared back at her with such intensity that it took all her breath away. Her heart did a crazy little flip, and that stomach tightened with an uncontrollable longing to run her fingers through his wind-ruffled hair and press her lips to that hollow spot at the base of his tan throat. Instead, she turned and walked away. Man, Austin said when he caught up with her, you really do hate him. Hate him? No, she didn't hate Slate. The feelings that assaulted her body wasn't even close to hate, which was exactly why she needed to stay away from him. Worried that Shirlene was still slightly tipsy, Faith drove Shirlene's navigator out to the house Austin shared with his mother and grandparents. It didn't take long, but it took long enough for him and Shirlene to get into a heated discussion about Bramble High School football. By the time they pulled up in front of the well-tended little farmhouse, Faith was concerned that they might come to blows. I think you're wrong. The offensive line is big enough that they don't need to have that right kind of motivation. Shirlene leaned around the front bucket passenger seat and looked back at Austin. Motivation? Austin snorted. And who's going to motivate them? Not that slow-witted senior they have for a quarterback. Jared isn't slow-witted as much as slow-footed. That boy couldn't get on the pocket and his life depended on it, which does not sense the line won't protect him. But still, he's not that bad. Not that bad. Did you see the game on Friday? It was his 2 intercepted passes that won the game for the Plainsville. He's telegraphing his passes like it was a billboard in Times Square. Shirlene's eyes narrowed. What position did you say you played back in Iowa? I didn't. Quarterback, Faith supplied, proud that she was able to finally enter the conversation. Quarterback? Shirlene almost jumped out of her seat. Varsity? Look, I need to go. Austin got out, but not in time to beat Shirlene. She jumped in front of him before he could even slam the door. Worried about what bodily harm to the kid, Faith hopped out and hurried around the front of the SUV. I assume Slate knows this? Shirlene asked. Yes, ma'am. He stuffed his hands in his front pockets of his jeans and smirked at her. Are you any good? Austin only raised his eyebrows, which made Shirlene let out a whoop and a fist pump in the air. Hot damn! She did a little dance and had Faith laughing, but Austin was scowling. It doesn't matter, Austin grumbled as he hooked the backpack over his shoulder. I'm not playing for Coach. The smile died on Shirlene's face. You're right, Slate can be pretty mule-headed when it comes to the rules, and if he kicked you off the team, then he'll have to be the one to let you back on. She chewed on a nail for a few seconds before her eyes lit up. But maybe if you were to apologize. Not a chance. He started for the porch. Oh, come on, she hurried after him. How else can we get to the playoffs? Not my problem. He took 2 porch steps before Shirlene grabbed his T-shirt. Not your problem, but it's your school. Austin jerked away. My school's back in Iowa. The front door slammed closed before Shirlene could finish her argument. Pig-headed people. She fumed on her way back to the car. I'm surrounded by pig-headed people. She circled around to the driver's side when Faith shot her a questioning look, and she lifted her hand. Believe me, I'm sober. I assume that I'm included in that pig-headed group, Faith said as she climbed into the passenger seat. Actually, since the margaritas, you've gotten a little better. Not completely, but some. Shirlene shook her head. No, I was referring to Slate and that stubborn kid, and you really think he'll make a difference in the team? I don't know, but anything's worth a try. She glanced over her shoulder at the backed out of the dirt driveway. Now, if we could only figure a way to get him back on it. Austin isn't going to apologize. I can see that. Shirlene clicked her bright nails on the steering wheel as she drove along the dirt road. So maybe we can get Slate to give in. That shouldn't be too hard. Slate seems like a pretty easygoing guy. Not about football. Shirlene stopped at the stop sign before turning right onto the highway. I thought your house was that way. Faith pointed in the opposite direction. It is, but we're not going home just yet. But I thought we had to get back for supper. That was just to get out of the meeting. Tonight is half-off ladies' night at Boots. Faith shook her head. Oh, no, no more margaritas for me or you. You're right, but we're not going there to drink, Faith. We're going there to boot, scoot, and boogie. Faith didn't have a clue what that was, but it didn't sound good. And that's the stopping point for tonight. So thank you for joining me on tonight's sharing of Going Cowboy Crazy by Katie Lane. I plan on sharing some more pages with you tomorrow, so that will be fun and interesting as well. Hopefully we can finish Cowboy Crazy. I would love to also finish Make Mine a Bad Cowboy, but we're just going to have to see how we do on time. We shouldn't have any magazines to review tomorrow night because I will save those for later, probably till Wednesday when I'm off again. Probably Wednesday, somewhere in there. But next up will be the singing video, so stay tuned.